right. Well, thank you so much, Beth, for talking with us today.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to hear what you have to say and also share information with us. So, obviously, you and I started coming to you, I think, in May, so a few months ago. But if you don't mind sharing a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your, Jade and Jasmine healing, that would be helpful.
Sure. So I wasn't always an acupuncturist. I was in sort of the finance and accounting field prior to being an acupuncturist. But when I was in my 20s, I lost both my parents. My dad had colon cancer, actually, and he had been getting colonoscopies every year because he was having polyps. And so the plan was for him to just, keep doing these colonoscopies. And one year they said, sorry, it's cancer. And within 4 years or so, after 2 rounds of surgeries and chemo and radiation, he passed away. And so that definitely got me interested in the idea of okay, we had a plan, but it was very reactionary. We were sort of waiting for the polyps to show up, and then we'd remove them. But what could we have done to promote well-being, to promote actually good health, and not wait for the pathology to show up before we did something? So that's an area where Chinese medicine can be very helpful. We can help to keep people well and promote good health, and not only, we'll certainly address, disease and the complaints that people have, but what we really want to do is then keep them healthy and promote a good health.
Absolutely.
Beyond just treating the disease.
Yeah. So then you made that switch out of finance and accounting and then into studying acupuncture, right, in Chinese medicine.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, it was a bit of a leap. It actually took me a couple of years to make that leap, but I'm very glad I did, obviously. It was a bit of a leap, but there's no turning back. It's like it's like a movie that I saw one time, like my previous life.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
and so how long have you been doing this approximately?
So this is my 12th year as a licensed practitioner.
Okay.
And the school that I went to was about it was 3 years year round, but I've done some, that was just for the acupuncture piece. So then I studied herbs on top of that. That was a separate program that I did afterwards. So it varies. One thing people might want to know is that, the acupuncture degrees that people have vary slightly. They're usually a master's degree level. Now there's sometimes doctorates, but if you're going to an acupuncturist, they should be licensed.
Okay.
There's still a few states where there is no licensing for acupuncture.
Interesting.
So I believe Alabama, and I can't remember the other ones, but in those states, people sort of practice at their own risk.
Okay. So anyone could call themselves an acupuncturist in those states and practice, you think?
I don't, I don't know exactly how it works.
Sure.
Okay. I know there's people that move to those states and practice with acupuncture degrees.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's people out there just I would hope not.
Yeah.
But there's a organization called the NCCAOM. People can go to their website and look up.
That's great.
License app. They do a sort of a board certification test that's sort of national.
Yeah.
And actually, not all states require that, but that's a starting place. And then they could always call their state board of health for a list of people who are licensed.
Okay, that's helpful. So there's some options to at least verify a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. You want to make sure people are licensed.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. So great. So I know that, you've been doing this for 12 years and then you also were doing it a little bit before as well, especially focused on fertility. Is that right? Do I recall correctly? Okay.
Yes. So I started a fertility focus fairly early in my practice because a fertility center opened in my area, and I started working there. So this was a place that had a purely fertility focus, and they were actually in the building with a medical fertility center, so they weren't related, but they were in the same building with the idea of like having an informal partnership.
Yeah.
So I worked there, and that's kind of where I first developed my interest in treating fertility, and because it's something that Chinese medicine works really well for.
Yeah.
It's something where we see a lot of success, and we really help people. So that was another reason why I wanted to. There's a long tradition of gynecology in Chinese medicine. Obviously, with the assisted reproductive technologies, that's new.
Yeah,
you don't find that in the classical texts, but we can still apply a lot of the theories to the women who are using the artificial reproductive technologies.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. That's helpful to
Yeah.
know. So can we go back to the basics, because I know the first time I tried acupuncture was with you only a few months ago, and I'm a fairly open-minded person, so I think that there's maybe some people that haven't tried acupuncture yet. So could you just explain to us like what it is, because sometimes I have a hard time articulating. Obviously people know needles, and not really needles, but small, but I have a hard time articulating what it does for the body.
Right. So there's actually a lot that's going on in the body, and there's a lot of theories as well. And there's things that we don't necessarily understand from a scientific perspective. So even studies that show, acupuncture had a good result for arthritis of the knee. Oftentimes at the bottom of the study it'll say mechanism unknown, because they know that it's benefiting the people, but they can't scientifically explain how. But there's a lot of theories about it, that it's affecting the nervous system, that it's stimulating anti-inflammatory response. And some of these things, a lot of these things have research, like there's little nuggets, like, okay, we found this anti-inflammatory marker was raised, when the person did acupuncture, or also the increase of the flow of blood. So especially with fertility treatments, we're doing a lot of treatments where we're trying to stimulate the flow of blood to the reproductive organs, and there's some studies on that. And there's also theories about things like gasotransmitters, which are actually relatively new even to the Western world, but
Yeah, I don't know if I've heard of that.
right, so like the way that nitrous oxide and other gases in our body create balance and homeostasis and are regulated, that acupuncture can affect those as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and not all of it is understood completely.
Yeah.
But that's to say, from a Western standpoint. From a Chinese medicine standpoint, it's a system that's been around for thousands of years and has its own diagnostic system, and is, it's understood within our context, but trying, exactly what you're saying, trying to explain from a Western, that's where it gets a little challenging, because if I say, well, we're, clearly you have liver qi stagnation, and so we're going to help move your qi, people, that doesn't
resonate.
Right, doesn't resonate.
Yeah.
It sounds like hocus pocus. So the language of Chinese medicine can be off-putting, for people who don't understand it, and why would they,
Yeah. Well, I know I was surprised when I went to China and went into a hospital and went into their like cancer treatment area, and it was cupping and acupuncture and other things. I think the blood, I forget what that is called.
Were they pricking and bleeding?
Yeah. And I didn't see any, massive machines or anything like that. So it was totally, just to see it was really surprising but that's what they use. That's what they rely on. So that's their medicine.
Right. It's very, in China, there's a lot more integration of Western medicine along with Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbs, qigong exercises, tai chi exercises, which are essentially kind of like the Chinese version of yoga, incorporating movements with breath. And those things they're so ingrained in the culture that they naturally, are in the medicine too. And here it's not part of our culture, so it's, I think it's understandably difficult for Western medicine doctors to always want to adopt or have their patients doing things that they don't know about. You know, they don't know if it's safe for, you know, they're, so therein lies the rub.
Right.
But it's, you know, every year that goes by, there's more research, there's more acceptance, there's a better appreciation for, you know, using methods like acupuncture instead of opioids or, you know, other
That's huge.
prescriptions or treatments that, you know, that have side effects,
Right,
to say the least.
Right. So I think that, you know, obviously my topic is mostly egg freezing that I, you know, blog about and write about, but it also is fertility too. So, and I think just what I'm learning along the way is a lot about our own fertility health, and just that we actually can do a little bit for it if we want to, even before we think about something like having a child or freezing our eggs or things like that. So I know you mentioned a little bit about bringing like blood to certain area and maybe like stimulating or, you know, doing something for the fertility area, but is there just sort of like a basic overview of how acupuncture relates to fertility?
Yeah, so as I said, there's, you know, a very long history of using Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and herbs, especially for gynecology in general.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that starts with simply regulating the cycle. So we ask people all kinds of questions about their cycle, including, you know, what does your menses look like? What's the blood like? What's the flow like? Is there pain? When is there pain? And all of these things give us clues to the little imbalances that wouldn't necessarily be considered a disease, but to us, it's the body saying, okay, there's a little imbalance here. And so the diagnostic system allows us to interpret those little things and create, you know, and treat them so we can have a treatment plan even when somebody's not necessarily, you know, sick. They don't have a diagnosis like endometriosis or PCOS. We can treat those too, but even those sort of like subclinical issues, we can start working on them to improve their overall health and their overall fertility. And, you know, your cycle is always going to be sort of a little barometer of your general health. So even people who aren't coming for fertility, I'll ask them about their cycle because it's kind of like I speak period, you know.
Yes, right.
That's
You're like
telling me it's an easy way for me to get information and understand some of the imbalances that might be occurring in them. So, and, you know, likewise, I'll also ask people who are coming for fertility about the other aspects of their health, you know, digestion, sleep, because obviously all of those things are going to affect your fertility. I mean, even something as simple as constipation, you know, if you have a bunch of bound up hot stool encircling your reproductive organs, like that's not a good thing, you know. So we need to make sure that the bowels are moving and that the digestion is healthy for the best, you know, possible outcomes with their fertility.
Yeah, wow. I can definitely understand that a little bit better too, of like whole body health, you know. So what if someone is like going through egg freezing, or they are in their first months of getting pregnant? It's still okay to get acupuncture, correct?
Yes, yeah. So I treat a lot of women who are going through artificial reproductive technology treatments, whether that's, you know, egg freezing, IUI, IVF. You know, medicated cycles is another option that people will do. And then also through pregnancy, we'll treat them as well, which is actually one of my favorite times to treat people because, you know, when you're pregnant, you don't want to take medications or have a lot of interventions. So that's a great time where, you know, we can get ahead of things like, oh, I'm starting to have a little bit of swelling. Okay, let's get on that, you know, before that becomes really bad. So yeah, there's a long tradition of obstetrics in Chinese medicine as well.
That's great to
And
know.
postpartum is a
Yeah.
time when I also really like, that's, women have been through a lot.
Yes.
So that is a time when I really also love to treat people and help them, get, their hormone levels regulated again, help with lactation issues, and just kind of restoring themselves
Yeah.
after this momentous, output of energy.
Yes.
And once they're breastfeeding, they're continuing to put out a tremendous amount of energy. It's taking a lot of energy, so that is actually also a really good time to get support.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Just because I know sometimes obviously I think there's more information now about breastfeeding, but it's not as easy as it looks sometimes. Like it's not as natural as, it just sort of like you see. So I think that's a great thing to like a good reminder too. Like the after the birth is maybe almost as important than before.
Yeah, and all of these things, in our society, we keep them behind closed doors.
Yeah.
So even, things that happen in pregnancy or things that happen in birth or things that happen, in the postpartum months, like, we don't know about them.
Yes.
And so it feels like, there's all this new stuff happening every time. So as much support you can get and as women can support each other, I think is also going to benefit all of us.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Just having more support and talking about it, being honest about what's happening. So would you say if it's ever like, too late to start acupuncture, like if somebody's already gone through an egg freezing cycle and like maybe they didn't get as many, eggs as they want and things like that. I know sometimes people go through it multiple times. Like, is there ever a too early or a too late to start?
No, we try to support people, wherever they are in the process. So, the cycle of oogenesis, of the development of the eggs and the follicles, that, takes about 3 or 4 months. And so, ideally, if someone's going to do an egg freezing cycle, I would say, start your treatment and start really earnestly taking care of yourself, in the 4 months before you do your cycle. Okay. That would be a great time to start treatment. And if you've had a treatment, or if you've gone through a cycle and you weren't happy with the results, again, like sometimes I'll say to people, what, if they say like, well, I'm gonna start my cycle, next week, I might say, well, you might want to consider just like putting it off another 2 or 3 months, so that we can really get some traction and really see if we can help that whole oogenesis process go a little better. And usually, it's worth waiting an extra few months to get the result that you want, that you ultimately want. I've had some people come as late as I'm getting a transfer this week, meaning a transfer of the embryo. And can I come in for a treatment? And I'm like, okay, yes, you can. You know that your embryo's in a lab right now, so we're not going to be able to affect the embryo, but we will be able to affect and the blood flow in your uterus, and also your nervous system, right? So the anxiety or the nervousness, that all plays hugely into how people are feeling and what the quality of their life. So that is always something that we can address.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's
very stressful.
It is really stressful, and I think like just having done acupuncture, even enjoying the clarity that comes from acupuncture and just sort of, I think, a little more like grounding is what I've been enjoying. So I can definitely see how like helping the body, not just like a targeted area, but just sort of like that overall like anxiety.
The mind, body, spirit. And Chinese medicine, that is we don't see those as separate, you know what I mean? So you're always this, the state of your well-being, your mental state or your emotional state is definitely going to play into your physical health. and vice versa. So
Yeah.
we are, you know, part of the hallmark of our medicine is that we're, you know, we're treating the whole person.
Mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's very fun for me, and it's fun to get to know people and see, you know, when somebody comes in, it's like I'm not just seeing, you know, the who they are as a professional, or, you know, I'm getting to see the whole picture of, and it's such a joy for me, you know, to get to know people that way. It's just one of the benefits of being an acupuncturist.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's delightful.
That's great. Well, I feel like you know, definitely answered some of my questions, and I really appreciated you talking about, like, you know, if you're thinking about egg freezing, when to sort of consider acupuncture a few months out, you know, to kind of get started and have that timeline for yourself. And then if somebody does see an acupuncturist, what do you think a good, like, cadence is in those few months beforehand? Like, is it every 2 weeks, or, I mean, I'm sure it, like, varies per person and their schedule, but
yeah, and their condition, you know, somebody that has a healthy cycle, you know, everything's perfectly fine, but they just want to enhance their fertility, they might come once a week. If somebody has more challenges, they might be coming twice a week. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll hone in on the time of their cycle where the issue is, and we'll design our treatment plan according to those times in the cycle. So, okay, I want to see you, you know, 3 times in your follicular phase, and your luteal phase we're just going to see you once, or, you know, we'll do things like that to try to hone in on, you know, what that person needs.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and then during the fertility cycles, we, you know, there's a little bit of play, because, you know, maybe at some point, okay, the lining, you know, let's say the lining isn't as thick as they want it to be. Okay, well, you know, call me up, we'll get you in, and we'll work on that. You know, because we that needs to happen now. You know, yeah. So we'll, you know, we kind of have to play it by ear sometimes a little bit.
And it can be really targeted if, like, it needs to be. You can focus on, like, that, like,
right,
in the moment. Like, come see
like,
me
this
today.
needs to happen this week.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Beth. Just in case anybody's local, because I know we're here in Arlington, Virginia, and your website is
JadeandJasmineHealingArts.com.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And I'll be sure to I'll put this on my blog, of course, and then I'll be sure to include that in the notes and everything, just so in case anybody wants. I love the videos on your site. That way I could, like, get to know you first before I even came in here.
Oh, good.
So I thought that was really helpful, and I think you just have good information on your site too. So I'll be sure to include it.
Yeah, people can send me an email if they have questions, or, you know, happy to.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Beth. All right. Cool.